All right, and we are live. How is everybody doing tonight? We have got a very lively chat. Am I coming through loud and clear? I am indeed. All right, we have got a lot to discuss tonight, so I'm going to cut right to the heart of the matter. Um, if anyone would like to join me and Mr. Lustig tonight for our Q&A, time permitting, at the end of our conversation. I'll make those links available later on. I'm going to give my patrons and my channel members first dibs at Mr. Lustig. So if you're a patron or a channel member, those links will be posted a little later on. If you have a question that you want to ask in the chat, either hold on to those until later on tonight or go ahead and send those in via super chat. That way YouTube keeps a log of them. And of course, it helps to support the channel. A couple of super chats I want to get to already. Thank you, Nico, for the two $5 super chats. A toast to Joe Spinell, of course. In these parts, nights like tonight are called summits. Hey, Piz and pals, welcome, Mr. Lustig. Thank you, Nico. And thank you, Steve, for the $2 super chat. Very kind of you guys. All right. So tonight, my guest is the legendary filmmaker behind Maniac, Vigilante, Maniac Cop, and Maniac Cop 2. During his time at Anchor Bay, he introduced scores of horror fans to filmmakers like Mario Bava, Dario Argento, and Lucio Fulci. Now, through his company Blue Underground, he is helping to keep physical media alive and preserve some of our favorite films. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome William Lustig to the Bloodstream.
Hold on a second. Hello? Hello? Hello?
I picked a bad time to bring him on. After all that, I picked... All right, there we go.
Okay.
What timing? What timing? Oh my God. But how's it going, sir? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm in hot and humid Baltimore.
Hot and humid Baltimore. Well, thank you so much.
There's someone here who can look at the air conditioner now. Would you like
No, like I'm on it. I'm doing that show.
You are, so not now.
Not now, no.
Oh my goodness.
Unless you can do it out there somewhere. I don't know.
You would need to be in the room.
Yeah, have him come in.
Okay.
Why not? We'll have another guest. We'll have another guest. But thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. I know you had to go to Baltimore kind of last minute, and you were nice enough to say, "Hey, let's just do it. Let's not postpone it. Let's not put it off. Let's do it." So I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Not a lot doing in Baltimore, so I'm happy.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know my viewers are too. We've got a very, very lively chat tonight. Everybody's super excited to see you and for the opportunity to talk to us for a little while. So
all right.
Let's go ahead and let's start at the beginning. I understand you grew up a big horror fan. What were some of your favorite horror films growing up?
I would say probably if you're talking like the very early would be like Psycho. I remember having a lot of fun seeing Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte in the theater. I remember it must have come out in the winter because we used to put our winter coats over us like a tent. And when the scary parts came, we would drop the coat so we wouldn't see the scary parts. That was one of those movies when the head came down the stairs. Yeah, that was a great one. And of course, House on Haunted Hill, I love.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they used to show that a lot on New York television. And I was a big fan of those really cheap horror films that they show on Chilla Theater, like Curse of the Faceless Man, and all those movies, Cape Canaveral Monsters. I used to love watching those on Saturday night, Chilla Theater.
Very cool. Well, clearly, you clearly had an affection for Italian horror and would later on help introduce so many, as I said in the introduction, to filmmakers like Argento and Fulci and Mario Bava. How big of an impact did those films have on you as a fan and as a
Huge.
future filmmaker?
Huge impact. I saw Bird with the Crystal Plumage in the theater when it first opened, the very opening on Broadway. I went to see the movie because they kept showing the trailer outside the theater on a box. And the images were so captivating that I went to see the movie. And I remember watching the film and during some of the scenes, my palms were sweating and I was so engrossed in the movie and the visuals that it just had an enormous impact on me. The music, the Ennio Morricone score. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, when I saw it, was like, I think it was 69, 70. I think it was 70. And there was a famous record store on Broadway called Colony Records. And if you think about this, I went with my hard-earned money from shoveling driveways of snow and stuff. I went to Colony Records and laid down $20 to buy the imported Ennio Morricone vinyl soundtrack.
Wow.
That's how much of an impact it had on me.
Wow, that is very, very cool. Nice.
And then, of course, I was hooked, and I went to see. I just became. I just went to see all the Argentos. I went to see the Bava films, and they only would play. These films would only play in New York City in Times Square on 42nd Street, because these films weren't considered to be anything more than grindhouse movies. And yet, I looked at these films, and they were so far and above the films that were coming out of California, all those Crown International AIP movies. I just never found those films to have this. To me, they felt like TV. That's what they felt. TV with a dash of horror. Whereas you watch those foreign horror films, and they're just amazing. I mean, Daughters of Darkness made an enormous impact on me. I saw that around the same time. Enormous impact.
That's great. Great film and a great Blue Underground release. You mentioned 42nd Street. I know you spent a lot of time in the infamous grindhouses of 42nd Street growing up.
I did.
So much has been said about 42nd Street, and it's been romanticized in documentaries. Actually, my favorite quote about 42nd Street was in the 42nd Street documentary. I don't remember who said it, but the quote was something like, "People have romanticized 42nd Street, but let me tell you, there was nothing romantic going on there."
No. No, but I got to tell you, as a lover of film, that's where the romance was on the screen. The theaters themselves were a disaster. You know, I was doing my Jack LaLanne leg exercises in order not to have rats run over my feet while I'm watching the movies. And it was really, you know, they had that smell of rancid hot dogs and popcorn that, God, you would never in a million years taste. Even back then, I was discriminating about that. But it was what was up on the screen. It was the joy of discovering these movies that you guys are now watching on physical media. I got to watch them on a big screen.
Just you had to lift your legs up so that the rats didn't crumb up your pants, your pant legs, right?
Yeah.
Was it as dangerous and as seedy and as scummy as we've all been made to believe?
I would say yes, although I never encountered any problems. I was never mugged. I was never, you know, although I did learn bladder control. I just, you know, I avoided the bathrooms there, but because the bathrooms were like going to your death, because you had to go down these, you know, these were old places, and the bathrooms were in the basement.
Oh,
so I mean, they were all kind of they were. You could tell at one time they were beautiful. The staircases had marble, and the bathrooms had marble, but it was all kind of scummy. You know,
yes,
it was definitely. I'm sure when Disney took these theaters over, they did some polishing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I can, well, I can and I can't. And I don't want to imagine some of the things that were going on in those bathrooms back in the day.
Yeah. It was, but I got to tell you, the theaters were fun. I remember seeing Chainsaw Massacre opening day, and the theater went absolutely out of their minds. And I remember a guy sitting in front of me turned to me, didn't even know me from anything, and going to me, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
Oh, that is so cool. Any other memories of 42nd Street or of the movies that you
I
watched
love the
there?
one. My favorite thing was the audience talking to the movies. You see, people go to movies now and they just talk. They do stupid stuff on their cell phones. They text message. They do all that kind of crap. But back then, they were talking, but they were talking engaged in the movie. It was like, bitch, what are you doing going in that house again? Oh, you're in trouble. Stay out of there. Just stay out, you know? That was the fun part. You don't have to crawl behind me. It's creepy.
She doesn't. She just doesn't want to be on camera. That's cool.
Okay.
That's cool.
The door's closed now.
But yeah, 42nd Street, that's something that I don't know if I would have wanted to experience it, but I love to hear people talk about it. And I love the documentaries about it, and just imagining seeing Chainsaw on the big screen in a grindhouse, or, you know what I mean, Black Christmas, Halloween, or even going, you know, just the nasty movies. You know what I mean? Just had to make them even better, seeing them on the big screen in a grindhouse. So
it was an experience.
I love it.
I saw Halloween though. I went to see it on Broadway, which costs a couple of dollars more, but it was a beautiful big theater, the Rivoli, and boy, that movie, what an impact it had. To see it over there. Just incredible.
How did it feel to see your own films play on 42nd Street?
Yeah, that was fun. To go see Maniac on 42nd Street. It was the audience talking to the movie, and you know, and you see that it was just fantastic. I felt like Zero Mostel in the producers. I would stand in the back of the theater and listen to the people reacting. Only I was delighted, you know, that they were engaged in the movie and screaming and yelling and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I actually went a couple of times with Joe. And he loved to be there when the audience would come out. There he was, and they would be like, some of them would scream, some of them go, "Hey!" You know, they embrace him. And
I can only imagine walking out of Maniac and being face to face with
with Joe,
the Maniac. Yeah. Good God.
He'd be wearing a suit or you know, something, you know, totally different.
Very, very presentable, very distinguished looking Maniac, right?
Exactly.
I've got to ask you about Billy Bagg.
Yes.
Who is Billy Bagg, and whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, well, what it was is when I did my first adult movie, or before I did it actually, I was, to make a living, I was driving an auto parts truck. And what would happen is I'd have to sometimes deliver greasy auto parts, either to or from the gas stations. And I would tell them, put it in a bag. I'm not going to get my hands all greasy. Put the parts in a bag. So I was nicknamed by the gas station people, you know, the mechanics, and by the people at the auto parts store as Billy Bagg. Because I wouldn't carry anything unless it was in a bag, because I didn't want to get my hands dirty.
That's understandable.
So what happened is, these guys on Saturday, the gas station mechanics would come to the auto parts store, and they would break open some beer, and they'd watch porno films there. They'd watch them at that time on 8mm. And so when I did my movie, I figured I couldn't use my real name because there was legality issues with that. And so I decided to use that name, Billy bag only because the guys at the gas stations and everything would know that I made the movie. So that was my way of identifying myself to a very fringe audience.
And you use that pseudonym to work in the adult industry. Were there any other early gigs that helped make ends meet before making your directorial debut?
Well, I would work as a production assistant on mainstream movies and also on adult movies that at that time were being shot by independent crews. Like the first adult film I worked on as a production assistant was called Hypnerotica. And the crew on that was complaining about a film they had just worked on. And so they were complaining that, oh, it was dangerous. We were shooting in Harlem at night. There was all these people. And as it turned out, the movie they were talking about, which had yet to be released, was Superfly. So I had the same crew from Superfly on, because they would just go almost as a team from film to film, you know. It didn't matter what the subject matter was. They were just like this independent, non-union crew.
Very cool. Yeah, you were actually working as a production assistant on 1973's The 7-Ups, starring Roy Scheider. On that set, you met someone who would forever change your life. Who was that person?
Joe Spinell. Yeah.
So much has been said about Joe, and he had quite a career and just quite a life. I'm sure you've been asked about working with him countless times over the years, but what was Joe Spinell like as a friend?
Joe was a guy who, and I said, and we all said this at his funeral. So we all he was a guy we loved. We loved him dearly, but there were times we wanted to kill him. and that was Joe. He was your best friend, but there were times he could do stuff to infuriate you.
Like what? Like what?
Oh God. Well, I remember one time, and it was probably something he probably did to me many times. Across from my apartment, there was a phone booth. We didn't have cell phones, and he would call me up like at 7 a.m. and say, "Oh, Bill, you want to have breakfast?" Because he'd been out partying all night, and he'd say, "You want to have breakfast?" I go, "Sure, Joe." He'd come over, and I'd say, "Okay, wait." This one time, I said, "Wait in the living room," and while I take a shower, I get in the shower, come out of the shower, and there he is on my kitchen table, freebasing coke with this flamethrower and this coke pipe. And I'm going, God almighty, Joe, what are you doing? You're driving me crazy with this stuff. And, that was Joe. And then I can't tell you how many times he would come to the office and he'd be when he came to New York City, he would often dress in a suit and tie. I don't understand why, but he would dress up. He would have the suit on, the tie. He'd just taken a shower. He'd stop at the office like 5 p.m. And he'd say, "Guys, I've given up drugs. I've given up drinking. I've given that all up." And we would tell, he says, "What's going on?" And we say, "Well, we just sold Maniac to Australia." "Oh, that's fantastic. Let's have a drink." And he'd go in the freezer, pull out the bottle of vodka and start, pouring shots.
and start celebrating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it was celebratory. It wasn't like drinking. It was celebratory.
There's a fine line there.
Yeah, that was Joe's fine line. Look, he'd drive you crazy. Look, there was a day he didn't show up on the set of Vigilante. And we had to send a posse out to find him. And thank God, our mutual friend, Frank Pesh, had this incredible memory. And Joe had been taken home by some girl at a bar that Frank and Joe were at. And for whatever reason, Frank remembered where this girl lived. And, Andy Garoni, my co-producer, and Frank, they had to go to the apartment. Joe was there. He had been doing drugs all night. He was so fucked up. We're shooting the scene. I'm using a double so I can keep shooting. And finally, they clean him up. They put him in his wardrobe, and he arrives on the set. And it happens to be a day where his mother was one of the extras in the courtroom. And his mother gets up and starts yelling at Joe in front of the whole cast and crew and everything. You didn't show up. Andy and Billy were looking for you. This is not right. You owe an apology to everybody. And he's going, Ma, please, Ma, I got a headache. Don't do this to me. But then, as I'm ready to want to kill him, we're shooting the scene with him and Carol Lindley. And Joe comes over to me, does like one of these things, come over here. And we talk. He goes, listen. He goes, how about Carol Lindley and I, when we were in law school, we were lovers. And now we're in opposite sides. I'm a defense attorney. She's a prosecutor. But we still have a magic between us. And we could shoot a scene maybe where we're making love on the beach. And, he was like, that, and he's coming up with this story that he wants me to shoot some other scenes with him and Carol Lindley making love. And so when you watch the scene, look at Joe and know that that's what he was thinking about when he looks over at her.
He definitely had a larger than life kind of personality, and he seemed like a big lovable guy with some demons, but he loved his mother.
He loved his mother like no one did. He loved his mother. Unbelievable, the devotion he had for his mother. And if you watch, I imagine many of your viewers have the Maniac Blu-ray. We have on there the Joe Spinell story, which really tells in 1 hour, it really gives you an idea of what Joe was like from his friends.
That's a great documentary, by the way. Yeah,
it really is a great documentary. Yeah. I didn't make it. It was made by David Gregory. But he did a fantastic job in interviewing the people, and really, you get a flavor for Joe.
Yeah. It's
kind of fun. On the new Maniac 4K, there's a extra, which is Joe Spinell on 42nd Street. And it's hilarious. He's walking down Broadway, and he's making comments about things. It's really funny.
Oh, that's awesome. There's actually a clip of Joe on YouTube. You can find it. Joe Spinell, somebody else, and Steven Spielberg. And they're watching the Oscar announcements.
That's the guy I was
Frank, that's right. Earlier. Yeah. And they're watching the Oscar nomination announcents. And they're like, how can you not nominate Steve? Like Joe Spinell's going, why can't you?
Who do you think made Jaws? The shark?
But that's a great clip on YouTube. I would definitely.
But he really saved Spielberg, because Spielberg was humiliated being the only director of a Oscar-nominated Best Picture not to be nominated as its director. Instead of, I think it was Federico Fellini or something, got nominated. And so Joe and Frank, were really kind of saving Spielberg, because there was the news crew there. They were there to capture Spielberg's reaction. And he was dumbfounded, expecting to be nominated.
Yeah.
That Frank and Joe were asked by Spielberg to come to Martha's Vineyard to play the two fishermen on the dock.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
The dock collapses, and the one guy says, come on, keep swimming, keep swimming, That was supposed to be Frank and Joe, and both guys had gone out partying or something, and they didn't feel like driving up to Martha's Vineyard, and they said, what is it, some B movie or something? But that was for them. That was written for them to play.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Two idiots that didn't go up there They could have been in a film, a classic movie. Oh.
They could have been in Jaws, but Joe was, of course, he was in The Godfather, but he was there. He had a small role in The Godfather, but he was there every day. So they counted him, and he was getting like these huge paychecks for The Godfather, like residuals and stuff. It's just, yeah.
Oh, I took Joe to the bank a couple of times. He had residual checks like close to $20,000 on The Godfather. Well, here was the thing: is in the Screen Actors Guild they have a flat rate that you can pay actors who are there for the whole movie. So everybody except for Marlon Brando, all the stars, were all paid this what they call Schedule F, which was a flat rate, and Joe was brought on as a day player, and as a day player you get paid more money on a per day basis than someone who's getting this flat rate. So, back then they didn't have computers. So Francis Coppola wanted Joe to stay on and, help him with casting, help him with this, And so, Joe was on the set and they kept signing him in as a day player until somebody at Paramount caught it. But by that point, he had been working for several weeks as a day player and making all this money. So when they go to calculate the residuals, he was like one of the highest paid residuals on The Godfather. It still is.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible. Maniac is an iconic piece of cinema for horror fans like me. It's holy ground. True or false? The budget for Maniac was a mere $48,000.
Well, it's partially true. We shot the movie for $48,000, but adding post-production and blowing up the negative from 16 to 35, the total came in at around $135,000.
Okay.
But we started with only $48,000 in the bank.
Wow.
And that's what we used to shoot the movie.
Wow. Did you and Joe do any research into real serial killers while you were developing the script for Maniac?
Joe was very committed to the character and researching the serial killers. We lived through the 70s, which was, for me, the golden age of serial killers.
All right.
You had Ted Bundy, you had John Wayne Gacy, you had, Henry Lee Lucas. There was all these really, what I consider really imaginative serial killers. David Berkowitz, Son of Sam, all this. And what we wanted to do was do a compilation character of all these people. And Joe did his research. He was very serious about it, very serious. And so he really just read up on everything on these people. He was devoured whatever he could to learn about these people. My function was primarily in coming up with the horror set pieces. Mm-hmm. But Joe was really driven to make a character that had a foot in reality. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Joe added to the character that was interesting, my apartment overlooked another apartment across a courtyard. And there was this boy whose window was always open and couldn't be more than 10, 12 years old. He clearly had something wrong with him. And Joe was fascinated because this boy would sit on his bed and just rock like this back and forth. Very, doing subtly, just as I'm doing, would rock back and forth. And Joe incorporated that into his character. He saw that boy, and it just sort of resonated with him that, this boy is maybe troubled, and he wanted to put that into his. So Joe was a serious actor without outwardly being serious, if you know what I mean.
Right.
He didn't take himself very seriously, but he took his work very seriously. Mm-hmm.
And you both were big horror fans. Joe was a big horror fan.
Yes.
Was who initially came up with the idea of, I can imagine the two of you saying, "Hey, let's make a horror movie," but who came up with the idea of Maniac?
Well, I would say it was sort of, we had been working on another project that was about a father and son serial killer team. And we had developed a script for this. And we didn't have the money to make it. We were trying to raise the money, couldn't raise the money. Then we decided, okay, let's do a simpler film focusing on a serial killer. But the way the script was originally, it was a cop was going to be played by Jason Miller, chasing this serial killer played by Joe Spinell. So you had scenes with Joe and you'd have scenes with this detective. And we still didn't have enough money to make that. So we decided, let's X out all the scenes with the police and let's just focus on the killer. And let's sort of treat Joe like the shark in Jaws, that he's Jaws on land, that he's this, insatiable, has an insatiable appetite for killing people. And that sort of evolved into what became Maniac.
Was shooting Maniac as chaotic as I've always heard it was? No permits, run and gun, get in, get the shot, and get out before the cops show up kind of filmmaking?
I would say probably most of the movie was done like that. What we did is we pretended we were NYU students. And we filed for permits, and we called the movie On the Run. So we didn't use the name Maniac because it would be too provocative.
Right.
So we called on the slates and everything, it said On the Run. And we did shoot we had permits for a lot, but we sort of stretched things. One of our key allies in making the movie was Randy Jerkinson, who appears at the very end of the movie as he's the tall, skinny cop at the end of the movie with the leather jacket. Mm-hmm. That's Randy. Randy was one of the French Connection cops. He's the guy who was delaying the French guys from getting their car. He's telling them, he's the guy in the parking, the garage. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Randy, I met also on the 7-Ups. And I asked Randy to come aboard on Maniac and work with us because he had a gold shield. And our gold shield detective is like God in New York. You remember the movie Prince of the City? Oh, yeah. When you have a gold shield in New York, you're Prince of the City. Nobody questions you. So anytime we would have any run-in with police or anything, he'd whip out his gold shield, and it was like, oh, okay, that's supposed to be all right then. So there was the one thing that he did for us that was really helpful is we had a permit to shoot in the subway, but only on the upper platforms. So when she comes down the stairs and she goes through the turnstile and then runs down the stairs, where the camera is placed behind her, we're able to shoot. When we were down on the platform with the camera, we didn't have permission to shoot, especially putting a camera on the train and having one on the platform, shooting her pounding on the door of the train. We had no permission whatsoever. But so what happened is, Randy, at a certain point during our shoot, took the subway supervisor who was there, to supervise us, took him out for dinner. And that's how we shot the scenes on the platform.
Wined and dined him.
We wined and dined the guy. He didn't know what we were doing. Maybe I don't know, but he didn't say anything. So we shot on the platform, we shot on the train, and that's how we got away with it.
Wow. That is, wow.
Yeah. And then by the time they came back, we were in the other section where she's running towards the bathroom. There we had permission.
That's very cool. I understand Tom Savini agreed to do the effects on the film as long as you gave him a place to crash in New York, so he wouldn't have to
Yes.
go back to Pittsburgh. He was having some kind of woman issue going on in
Exactly.
Pittsburgh.
Well, Tom at that time had a lot of women issues. And so he didn't want to go back to Pittsburgh. Here's what happened. We met Tom. We wanted Tom Savini to do the effects. So the three of us went to the set of Friday the 13th in New Jersey to meet with Tom. And we told him about Maniac, and we said, we want you to do the effects. And I don't know if he would have done it or not done it, but he said to us, look, I'll do your movie, but I can't go back to Pittsburgh. Can you get me an apartment so when Friday the 13th wraps, I could come to New York and not have to go to Pittsburgh? And that's what we did. We got him an apartment, and which doubled as his effects studio. And in our insert stage, we shot some of the effects in the apartment, and that was it. And Tom did it for very little money, recycling a lot of things he had used in other movies. And that's how we did it.
Was there a conscious effort to make the film as extreme as it is? And I don't mean just the violence or the makeup effects, but there's such an intensity to Maniac and a really deep sadness.
Well, I think the sadness in the film was really the music enhancing Joe Spinell's performance.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting because the composer, Jay Chataway, keyed into the sadness of the character the same way Joe did. So it was kind of strange to have a serial killer where you had a certain empathy for the character. And that's what for many people made the film more disturbing, because there was sort of an identity with this guy. And as far as the depiction of the violence in the film, I really wanted to make a film that delivered for the 42nd Street audience, going back to 42nd Street. I knew that I didn't want to pull back. I knew what the audience wanted, and I really just had to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, at the end of the movie, when that headless corpse comes up, that was actually what's her name?
Betsy Palmer.
Betsy Palmer. Betsy Palmer's stump from Friday the 13th.
Talk about recycling gags from other movies. There you go.
Yeah, well, you just recycled it from a movie you just came off of.
Now, I'm gonna say that the answer is probably no, but the big shotgun to Tom Savini's head, you did that in New York City, I'm guessing without permits.
Yes.
Very loud shotgun. I imagine after you shot that, you packed up and got the heck out of there quick.
Well, not exactly. What happened was we did use a live double barrel full load shotgun. We were shooting towards a major highway in New York, the Belt Parkway. It's a major highway. And after we did the scene, my only concern was it wasn't like a populated area, but my fear was if anybody saw us who was driving by, or anybody who we didn't see nearby, calling the cops. So we had a car standing by, and I grabbed the shotgun out of Tom Savini's hand, because Tom Savini doubled Joe Spinell. So Tom effectively shot his own head. So Tom was lying on the concrete, which we didn't realize he would land on the concrete. It just turned out that the hood of the car was very oily from the fog that we put. The fog effect laid oil. So if you look at it carefully, you'll see Tom Savini's legs come out from under him, and he falls backwards off the hood of the car onto the concrete below. But I didn't care. I just grabbed the shotgun out of his hand, went to the trunk of a car that I had waiting, threw the shotgun in the car, closed the trunk, told the production assistant, drive towards Staten Island. So we got the shotgun out of there and we continued shooting.
Did you have to kind of game plan the shoots where you didn't have the permits and maybe you were doing something a little illegal or a lot illegal? Like, okay.
So that was the most illegal, because firing live ammunition on any city street, there's not a permit on this planet that will permit you to do that.
But did you have it game planned like a bank heist? Like, okay, so after it happens, I'm going to throw the gun in the trunk. You go this way.
Yeah. I had the car standing by. Yes, I did have the car standing by. I knew what we were doing was highly illegal, but was going to be effective. And I just grabbed the shotgun from Tom, threw it in the trunk, drive to Staten Island. And that was my game plan. I had a sacrificial production assistant.
you throw him at the police. It's all his fault.
Precisely.
The poster for Maniac is such an evocative piece of art. The artwork is almost as iconic as the film itself because the image tells you everything you need to know about the movie. And if you find that image offensive or objectionable, then this movie is not for you. Did you have any say or any input creatively into that artwork?
Well, no. To answer in short, no. The company, Analysis Film Corporation, called me up one day. I'm not sure Joe came with me. It might have been just Andy and I. They called us up to say, we have the poster for Maniac. So we go to their office and they unveil the poster, and it was like, oh my God. It was so striking. I said, you're going to actually put this on a poster? And they go, yeah, people will be so controversial. And these guys courted controversy. They had just released Caligula. And so for them, controversy was their breakfast. Right. They just love controversy.
Yeah, I mean that's such a great piece of art. Everything about it, and clearly, I mean, when you saw it, it had an effect on you. And it definitely helps. Either it sells the movie, but it, like you said, controversy creates cash. Controversy creates word of mouth, and there you go.
Yeah. It was effective. Let me put it to you that way.
Well, how did you feel having your directorial debut the subject of protests and very negative reviews from people like Siskel and Ebert?
Well, I mean, I anticipated negative reviews no matter what. So that to me didn't come as a surprise. All these movies got negative reviews. I mean, the films that we consider classics today got negative reviews. I remember, negative reviews of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which we consider a great classic today, was getting negative reviews, dismissing it, as a spaghetti western. And so, fuck the critics, As far as the controversy, I expected it to be controversial, but not to the extent that it became a national controversy. I didn't expect that there would be, people like Siskel and Ebert making it a cause. Women's groups. I'll tell you a quick story. In California, there was this woman who represented the national organization. I think it's Violence Against Women or something. And she was standing in front of the Hollywood Theater where Maniac was playing, holding up an ad. and saying to the press, this is a movie that teaches people how to stalk and kill people, kill women every day. And we're playing these in our theaters and, blah, 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 going on and on. Well, a year or two later, I'm watching TV and she was under arrest for a murder that she was an accomplice to prior to her doing that press conference.
Wow.
And she was at one time a hooker, or she was pretending to be a hooker, and she was doing the thing with her boyfriend where they were robbing the Johns, and
Right.
one of them got out of control, and the boyfriend killed the John, and she helped in disposing the body, and there she is standing in front of the theater, all holy, all high and mighty, protesting a movie where we're just throwing around ketchup.
Right. Yeah. Do you think all the negative attention that Maniac received helped or hurt the film?
I think it had both effects. It did hurt us theatrically with the film because there were a lot of theater owners who wouldn't play the movie because of the controversy. One of the regrets that the distributor had was not going national all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they went into the key major markets, which is a conservative way of doing it, and then going and taking those prints and going into the smaller markets. Whereas when they look back at what they had done, they would have been better off going and blasting it to every theater in the country that would play the movie.
Right.
And then, that would have been a better way, because what the theater owners would say is, yes, but we have to live here.
Mm.
So they didn't really, for them, whatever money they would make from Maniac wasn't enough to deal with the backlash they would get in their community.
Right. Mm.
Whereas if they had played it without the history of the controversy, it would not have had the problems. They would have played it. Maybe they would have gotten controversy, but they would have played it and it would have made money.
Right. Hmm. Did the controversy? Did Maniac after the controversies? Did it open doors for you? Did it close doors for you moving forward in your career?
I can't say. Well, first off, I never really thought of having a career. I always wanted it. I loved the idea of being an independent producer, director, go out, raise the money, go make the movies, go sell them, and go on and make the next movie. And so I didn't like court getting an agent or going to other companies with hat in hand, looking for directing gigs. I basically just wanted to go and make Vigilante. I had that movie in my head, and that's what I did.
Now, you acted as producer on the 2012 Maniac remake starring Elijah Wood. Any trepidation on your part to be involved in a remake of Maniac?
No, I made a shitload of money.
and the film turned out pretty well.
It did. Elijah's great. Alex Aja is great. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are terrific people. And my credit, by the way, was really an honorary credit. I didn't produce the movie. Mm-hmm. I just licensed the rights to them to make a remake. So, but these were really good people. They were top notch. Early on, Christopher Gans was involved. Oh. So when I first did the deal for the remake, it was Christopher Gans and Alex Aja. And eventually Christopher Gans went away. I don't know why, but he kind of went away from it.
Do you think Joe would have approved of the remake and of Elijah Wood's performance?
Yes. I think Joe would have been thrilled. Would have been thrilled. And I told that to Elijah. I said to him, Joe loved young actors. He loved up and coming actors. And, he would have been thrilled.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned Vigilante. Let's talk about Vigilante. I saw Vigilante for the first time not long ago, courtesy of the beautiful Blue Underground 4K release here. How did Vigilante come about?
I wanted to make a film different. I wanted to make a action film using the inspiration of the Italian Polizia films, Polizia Testi films, and so that's where I kind of came from. And so I decided I would come up. We had this very simple urban retribution movie, and I wanted to kind of make it like an urban spaghetti western, giving it the look of the Polizia Testi films. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started from, and so I that's kind of got me going.
With Maniac under your belt, was it easier to get the funding for Vigilante?
Yes and no. There were some areas we were able to get funding for the film that made it easier, but we still didn't have enough money to make the film I wanted to make. So we had some money, but we didn't have enough. And I kept thinking, oh well, if we start shooting the movie, more money would come, and that's the mistake of a lot of filmmakers. So it wound up being a real struggle to finish the movie.
And you actually didn't you use the opening of Vigilante where Fred Williamson is saying, take back your city, dig it, and you sort of use that as a promo to say, hey, this is our movie. Do you want to put some money into it? And that's how you got some additional funding, right?
There was a film festival in Italy that's now defunct called MIFED, and they had closed circuit monitors in the auditorium where they would have the rooms where people would go to buy movies. So we were playing it, like every hour we'd play it on the monitors, and we'd tell them which room to go to buy the movie. And we wound up selling it to like Latin America, some Scandinavian countries, but still we didn't really, I don't know if it was because it was a change of genre for me, that, if I had made another horror film, maybe it would have been easier to raise the money. I don't know. But I think it was because it was another genre. People weren't quick to, commit to the film.
Right.
We later sold it to every territory in the world, but initially it was to do what's called a pre-sale, which is where a distributor commits to buying the film without seeing it. That was the struggle. But once we screened the film, the buyers were scrambling to get the film.
Well, let's talk about, because we always hear about, financing movies and getting funding for movies and scraping the money together. What's that journey like to try and get the money together to start the movie? Who are you going to asking for money? Are you looking in your own couch cushions for loose change? How do you finance a movie? You talked about the foreign sales and stuff, but how does it, what was step one back in the day?
I was young. When I made Maniac, I was 24 years old. When I made Vigilante, I was 26. And at that age, you're fearless. There's something inside you genetically that makes you fearless. Some people use that to drive cars fast. Some people use it to drink and do drugs. Me, I wanted to make a movie, and there was no holds barred as far as looking to find the money. I would ask everybody and everyone. I would beg, borrow, and steal to raise the money to make the movies. I had a president of a bank in New York who he's probably now dead, so I could say. I used to get him laid, to get loans from the bank.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I would do whatever I had to do to get the money. And that was my goal, the money.
Hey,
You know,
gotta-
and I bang out credit cards, max out credit cards. It was borrow money from, came to last resort, borrow money from my family at one point, and Andy Garoni too. So we did whatever we had to do, but fortunately we were able to pay everybody back and go on.
I mean, you have to admire that drive. If there's a will, there's a way, right?
Well, I'm saying if anybody thinks that when they are in their early 20s, there's somebody out there, unless they have a rich parent, if there's somebody out there who's going to underwrite your movie, they're kidding themselves, because the story I'm telling you is not unique to me. It's the Bruce Campbell, Sam Raimi story, Rob Tabbert, that group. I can name Don Coscarelli. I can name a lot of people that story applies to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not unique.
Yeah. And what a cast in Vigilante. Robert Forster, Fred Williamson, Rutanya Alda. Did you feel like you were maybe coming up in the world a little bit working with such a great cast?
Definitely. I mean, I've always felt that actors are the face of your movie. Mm. And the better the actors, the better your movie is going to look and feel. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've always found interesting is when I see some independent films and they think that, that their fancy camera work is what's going to engage the audience. No, it's the face of the movie. It's the actors. It's the script. That's what's going to engage the audience. So I've always felt that if you hire the best actors, you're home. That's you've done your homework. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a big Robert Forster guy. I understand you two remained close throughout the years. How was Mr. Forster to work with, and what was he like as a buddy?
He was great. I mean, I can't say enough about Bob. He was just a great person. He was a team player. I remember when we were running on fumes, financially, and we couldn't afford any longer any trailers or any changing rooms. We were shooting the scene of the car chase in Brooklyn. And I said, Bob said, where can I change into my wardrobe? I said, Bob, do you see that gas station on the corner? Ask the attendant for the key to the men's room, please. And he laughed and did it. He knew we were strapped. We weren't holding on to money or anything. So it was great. It was just a great time.
That's awesome. I love movies shot in New York in the 70s and early 80s. What do you think it was about the city at that time that made it so photogenic? Is it because New York at that time was considered to be a dangerous place, or what?
The truth is, I still think New York is photogenic, except for Times Square. Forget about Times Square. That's a disaster. But most of New York is still very photogenic. But I think back then there was a sense of danger. And when you shot in the Times Square area, you could feel the danger on every part of the frame and outside the frame that you were shooting. Mm-hmm. And that was good. That's what made it interesting.
I just love that gritty look and feel, and I love seeing the, like I said, 42nd Street at the time, or some of the more rundown areas, and I don't know. It's I love watching movies from that era that are in New York.
Yeah.
When did you first meet Larry?
Could you close the door behind me?
Yeah. When did you first meet Larry Cohen?
I met Larry Cohen when we were in we were shooting Vigilante, and Fred Williamson invited Larry Cohen out to the set. I don't think he came to the set. I think he came, we went for a drink with him or something. But that's where I met Larry. And I met him through Fred Williamson. But of course I knew who Larry was.
Right. Right. Cohen has been described as a maverick, a genius, a truly independent filmmaker. He always dreamed big, it seemed, but didn't allow the small budgets he often had to work with alter his vision. How would you describe the late Mr. Cohen, and what was it like working with him?
He was a brilliant screenwriter. He was brilliant, and that's what distinguished his movies. Is it was on the page. He had great ideas. He was a really good writer, and he had a good taste in actors. So he was able to really make very interesting films for very little money, because the actors really he gave them material that they wanted to work with.
Maniac Cop is one of those 80s movies that I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes when people start listing their favorite movies of that decade, because it doesn't fit into one genre or another. It's horror, yes, but it's also a cop movie. It's a noirish kind of detective story with action and mystery and a supernatural kind of spin on it also. I understand you actually started shooting Maniac Cop before Larry Cohen had even started the script. Is that right?
That's true. What happened is the idea for Maniac Cop came from a lunch Larry and I had in New York in February. And what happened is I became committed to making this movie. I wanted to make Maniac Cop. I said, we have a movie here. And the next month was the St. Patrick's Day parade in March. So Larry wrote some pages. I call up Bruce Campbell. I say, Bruce, I want you to come to New York and bring clothes you can double, because I'm making a movie, Maniac Cop. I don't have a script. Don't ask me for one, but I want you to star in the movie. And Sam Raimi was in New York. He was waiting for the financing for Darkman to come through. So the group of us went out on St. Patrick's Day, and we filmed all that police stuff, all the police parade stuff, and Sam doing the news reporter.
Yeah, and again, I mean, what a cast! You know, Bruce Campbell, Richard Roundtree, William Smith. I love that guy's voice, and like you said, but you even had a cameo from Sam Raimi in there.
Yeah.
And another one of my all-time favorite actors, the legendary Tom Atkins.
Yes.
And it was a ballsy move, killing him off 2/3 of the way through the film. Was Maniac Cop, it seemed to be a step up budget-wise a little bit, larger cast, more locations, you got car chases, you got action sequences. Was it a difficult shoot, or?
It actually went quite smoothly. It wasn't as difficult. Firstly, we had all the money, versus on Vigilante, where I was out raising the money while I'm shooting it. So we had all the money, and I had a good production manager on the movie, Jeff Richard, really good production manager, good team of people, and it went smoothly. I mean, it really did. I mean, the only thing I could think of that we had any problems with was some Steadicam stuff that we shot the first day that we had to go back to New York to reshoot. That's the guy handcuffed running down the street.
Oh yeah.
We had to reshoot that. But aside from that, it went very smoothly.
How did you discover? I can't imagine anybody else playing the Maniac Cop other than Robert Z'Dar. How did you discover him?
In a movie called The Night Stalker, I think it was called. Was it called The Night? Yeah, I think it was called The Night Stalker. It wasn't based on Richard Ramirez. It was an entirely different. It was a cop chasing a serial killer movie. Charlie Napier was in it, and it was a really good movie. But Robert Z'Dar was scary playing the serial killer. So I remembered the effect he had on me, and so when we were casting, I wanted Robert Z'Dar. We saw the people, but I just always had Robert Zadar in mind.
Now, did you? Because I mean, Zadar and Bruce Campbell both have very definitive chins.
Right.
Was that? Did you? Because I mean, you kind of is Bruce involved? Maybe
Yes.
is he? Was that? Did you go? Well, I've got to have Zadar because Bruce and Zadar, they've got.
It was just a coincidence, but then it worked.
Yeah,
I was a lucky coincidence.
Very cool. Maniac Cop has garnered quite a cult following over the years. Even some mainstream critics can't deny, what a fun movie it is. Looking back on Maniac Cop, how do you feel it's aged over the years?
Well, I mean, I think it's aged quite well. I mean, my only hesitation is that, unfortunately, the version that's available for people to see that Synapse released is a really bad transfer of the movie. And as a result, a lot of stuff that was supposed to be hidden in the movie is our shortcomings are on full display. And that it just horrifies me. When I saw it, it horrified me. So it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate because that's the version that's shown on Shudder and it's shown all over, and it's awful.
Any chance of Blue Underground getting the rights to Maniac Cop at any point in the future?
I don't know. I know Synapse has it for a few more years. But I just recently learned there could be a materials problem. Nobody knows at this moment where the negative is, or at least they haven't told me. As of a few weeks ago, nobody knew where the negative is.
That'd be really too bad if you couldn't find. I kind of feel
it's at this point. I've kind of in my mind it's my lost movie.
Where did the idea of doing a sequel to Maniac Cop come from?
Well, we immediately knew that this would be a movie we were going to do sequels to. That's why we shot the piece where the hand comes out of the water at the end. Can you hear her in the background?
A little bit, yeah.
Jessica? Could you? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so we always had in mind we were going to do a sequel. We didn't know what the sequel is, and but we knew we were going to do a sequel to it.
You had another incredible cast to work with: Robert Davi, Claudia Christian, Michael Lerner, Leo Rossi, Clarence Williams III, who just recently passed. I understand Joe Spinell was originally cast to play the role that Leo Rossi played as the Maniac in the film.
Not at all.
Is that true? Okay.
Not at all. That's untrue.
Okay.
In fact, I think Joe died before we started shooting Maniac Cop.
Okay. He
died while I was shooting Relentless. And then that movie, I wanted him to play a role.
Okay. It appears as if you had an even bigger budget to work with this time around. Was it a smoother shoot, or, in the words of the late great Notorious B.I.G., more money means more problems?
Well, it wasn't because of having more money. It was we were shooting in the winter in New York between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it was brutally cold. And it made for almost it was kind of funny because next to the hotel that we were staying at, because most of the crew came from Los Angeles, the cast and crew, there was a cold weather store, one of these places that, they sold tents and they sold, all this cold weather jackets and, that Eddie Bauer type stuff. And before we went out to shoot the first night, we all sort of gravitated to the store and all kind of store. We didn't talk about going there, but we all met there and we were buying stuff to wear. Okay. After the first night of shooting, we're back there before going out the second time. I bought gloves that I could have picked up moon rocks. They were so big. I bought a hat that was like this gigantic warm hat because it was so brutally cold out there that I doubled up on everything. It was rough. I mean, it was challenging, and it was a challenge. You know, it was a challenge making the movie. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a challenge, but it had nothing to do with the money involved with the film. It just was simply, again, I was trying to make, you know, a bigger movie for the money that I had. I mean, that's what every filmmaker, that's the dilemma every filmmaker is in. You give a filmmaker $10, he wants to make a $20 movie.
Right.
And so I was overly ambitious, and I was also the producer. So you're in a position where you're making decisions as a director and a producer, and like, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Go big or go home.
Yeah.
I heard that New Line was going to, they showed interest in releasing the film theatrically, but it didn't happen. Why didn't that happen?
Because another company came along that offered more money than New Line, and it was a better deal for the producer. The producer, before it ever got shown to the public, had recouped the entire, when I say the financiers, I should say, the financiers recouped the cost of the film before the film ever hit any screen or any television or anything anywhere in the world. So that's a good position to be in. Whereas New Line was, you're going to take less money, but we're going to give you a big theatrical release.
You work often with the same actors: Leo Rossi, Robert Forster, John Goff, Frank Pesh. Were they your lucky charms, or were they just easy to work with and you?
Well, I mean, I consider them and a lot of the crew family.
Right.
It was family. You know, you can call on these people and they're family. They're there to support you, do good work, and support you. What more can you ask?
Exactly.
And they're talented.
And I was going to say they're great actors. I mean,
Yeah.
I love Leo Rossi, and
wasn't he great in Maniac Cop too?
Oh, absolutely.
I thought he was great in that. You know, if it was up to him, he did all those Relentless movies. You know, we did the first one, but I consider that to be boring. I love him in Maniac Cop too. You know, I told him I wanted it to be Bela Lugosi in Son of Frankenstein. And he gave it a white trash twist instead of being Hungarian.
Yeah. You also had Jackie Earle Haley in Maniac Cop 2.
3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. 3. Yeah, that's right. 3. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to ask you about Maniac Cop 3 here momentarily. You mentioned Relentless, but first I want to ask you about Hit List with Lance Henriksen, Jan Michael Vincent, and Leo Rossi. Did that movie not get any kind of release outside of VHS as far as home media releases?
Again, here's a situation where the movie was in profits before it was finished. What happened was Warner International bought the foreign theatrical and video for nearly the cost of what it cost to make the movie. I think the picture was about $1.4 million, if I recall correctly, and Warner came up with $1.2 million. So you have now USA, United States and Canada, where there's only $200,000 to recoup, and there's all the rights available. So it was foolish for the company to put it out wide theatrically and risk the money when they didn't have to. They just gave it a New York, LA theatrical release, and then put it out on video, where it was a huge success on video.
Has it never gone beyond video? Because I tried tracking it down. I couldn't find a DVD, a Blu-ray. I couldn't find it streaming anywhere.
It's sad. Yeah, what the problem with that is Cinetel sold their library to a company that went bankrupt. And so the rights are right now in a bankruptcy for Hitless. And it's a sad situation. That's why it never came out on DVD or anything.
I really wanted to check it out because I'd never heard of it, and I love Lance Henriksen. So
it did come out on Laserdisc, and
Oh,
it did come out on VHS. It just never came out on DVD or Blu-ray. And the sad part is, I know where the original negative is, so it would be a beautiful, beautiful Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray. It's just frustrating.
yeah.
Here's where I have a lost film, but it's not because of the materials. It's because of the rights are stuck in a bankruptcy, along with a lot of other movies.
Yeah. Wow. I did watch Relentless for the very first time last night. And I very much enjoyed it.
Okay. It's by far my most successful film.
Yeah, I noticed there were at least 2 sequels. I think there's at least
Three. There's 3 sequels to it. Yeah. Yeah, it was by far my most successful film. It did huge business. It did very well theatrically, which is a shock. Normally independent films don't do very well theatrically, but it did well. And it did well foreign. Warner picked it up for foreign. And domestic VHS was enormous. That's why there were 3 sequels.
But yeah, again, I mean, you had a great cast: Robert Loggia, for God's sake, Meg Foster, Leo Rossi again, Bo Starr, Judd Nelson. I thought it was a highly entertaining, cop versus serial killer flick, and it's available to stream on Amazon Prime. So I definitely recommend it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it didn't break any new ground, but it was kind of a fun movie because of the cast. I really attribute the cast. Lance Henriksen is great. Rip Torn, you forgot the Ripster. Oh no, that's Hitless.
That's Hitless, yeah.
That's Hitless. I'm sorry. But yeah, we had a good cast in Relentless.
Yeah. It's also pretty interesting that Phil Alden, the writer of Relentless, the same year Relentless came out, another film that he wrote and directed also premiered, Field of Dreams. You've got Relentless in theaters and Field of Dreams.
Well, the reason Phil didn't put his name on the movie is because of Field of Dreams. And because of the contract that he did to write Relentless, which when he wrote it was called Sunset Killer or something. When he wrote it, it was done under a certain WGA agreement, which allowed the writer to remove his name.
Okay. But yeah, you mentioned Lance Henriksen and Rip Torn. I forgot to mention Rip Torn in Hit List. Rip Torn is one of those actors who had a pretty immense reputation. How was he to work with?
We got along so well because I was a huge, and I'm still am, a huge fan of Rip Torn's movie Payday. If any of you get the opportunity to see Payday, run, don't walk. You got to see that movie. It is one of the great, great performances in a very little seen movie.
I'm writing it down here. I've never seen it. Payday.
You owe it to yourself. It's just terrific, and he's wonderful in it.
Oh, very cool.
And I had seen it so many times in the theater. It played New York repertory a lot. And a lot of the shows, because the repertory theaters were in the Village, that's where Rip lived. And so he would often go to the theaters, like the Bleecker Street Cinema. You'd go to see Rip Payday, and Rip Torn would appear doing a Q&A with the audience because he loved the movie too. So when I went up to Rip the first day and told him what a fan I was of Payday and how many times that I even mentioned seeing him at the Bleecker Street Cinema, doing the Q&A, he knew that I was a true fan of the movie and that I was a buff. We had the best time working together. There was never any problems. I mean, I loved the guy. We had a great time. He had a birthday during the shooting of the movie. I had champagne brought to the set, and he was just he left the set very happy.
That's awesome.
Very, very happy.
Yeah, I asked him. I had Don Coscarelli on one of these not long ago, and I asked him about working with Rip Torn on Beastmaster, and he said the exact same thing, pretty much, that he was just a pleasure to work with. That he would, because Don was he considered him sort of a newer filmmaker. He tested him a little bit, but he passed the test, so he was friends with him for the rest of his life. So I think that's yeah.
I would say probably Robert Foster, and then maybe a little bit Fred Williamson, and some of like Frank Pesh is a friend of mine. I'm very, very rarely carry on continuing friendships. I mean, we're friendly when I see them, but they're not friendships,
right?
Because there's always that there's always that employer-employee dynamic, and whatever you're doing, you feel the pressure sometimes of hiring these people, and that doesn't make for a very candid friendship.
Right.
You follow?
Right.
If you're an employer.
Right. No, that's true. That's very true. You passed the directing reins over to the infamous Alan Smithee on Maniac Cop 3. I'm excited to hear Mr. Smithy's commentary on the upcoming Blue Underground 4K release for Maniac Cop. He's never done an on-camera interview, and he's got quite a resume. So,
well, the reason Alan Smithee is on the film is I directed a big portion of Maniac Cop 3. Well, look, let me back up a second. Maniac Cop 3 was an entirely different script than what we shot.
I was going to say that the film feels like a movie searching for a plot.
Yeah, what happened was Larry wrote a script which was where the lead character was a black detective. The movie was going to be set in Harlem, and it was all that Santeria, voodoo stuff, all harkened back to this detective's earlier life and his growing up as a child. So there was something connected with that. The character was connected. What happened on Maniac Cop 3 was a major financing component was the Japanese. They were the major financing on it. And they were hesitant to sign the agreement. And the sales agent didn't understand why. And I kind of had an experience with the Japanese on Vigilante where they didn't buy the movie initially because of Fred Williamson being in the movie. And I was then told that the Japanese audiences don't relate to the black stars. They don't relate to them.
Oh.
I mean, that's certainly untrue today, but we're going back to the late 80s, early 90s. And that was the thought back then. So I said to the sales agent, would they sign the agreement if the lead was played by Robert Davi? And the sales agent came back to me and he said yes. Now we're in pre-production, we're casting, we're doing location scouting, we are, we're spending money, we're hiring crew, and now we have a square peg in a round hole. We have Robert Davi playing a part that was intended for a black detective. and some of the characteristics of that black detective played a role in the plot. So we went to Larry Cohen to ask him if he would rewrite the script, so we can make it more tailored to Robert Davi. And he said, yes, if you pay me again to write the script. Because he wasn't about to write a second script when he had already delivered one that had been accepted. So that was not possible. And so we wound up first having to X out all the scenes that was specific to that plot and that role. We had to X out those scenes. Then we had to figure out a way to fill up the movie. Now, I was shooting what was left after we X'd out. We went from like a 90-plus page script to like a 70-page script. So when I finished shooting, we had about an hour of running time, which was, of course, unacceptable. Now we had Robert Davi, we had, and the only thing we could do was find a way to pad it between the Maniac Cop and scenes with Robert Davi. And I made a mistake. I made a foolish mistake. I quit the movie. I said, look, I can't do this. This is like really awful. I shot all the big stuff. I shot all the big action scenes. All of that stuff is done. Let's just, let me part ways. And Joel Soisson, great guy. He was on it as the producer. I didn't produce that one. I said, why don't you just shoot all that stuff to fill it in? And that's what he did. In retrospect, it was a mistake. I should have stayed on the picture. I should have done what I could do to salvage it. I did do some work on the new 4K of the movie. I did do some things that I could do without changing the movie. I added some visual effects. I added sound effects, things that I would have done had I completed the movie. But I didn't feel it was fair for me to take a credit as director, although my name is on it as director overseas because they pre-sold it on my name in the name of the movie. And so I decided, since it really wasn't anybody's single movie, that it would be better just to call it an Alan Smithy movie.
I did a stream with Rowdy Harrington, the director of Jack Spack, Gladiator, Roadhouse, etc. last year. He said that directing a movie is like going to war. Would you agree with that analogy?
I would say most of the time it is. I would say when you're doing a challenging movie like Maniac Cop 2, it's like going to war. And the enemy is not the people around you. The enemy is the world out there that's finding ways to get in your way. The traffic that won't stop. The police that won't give you the permits to do what you want to do. That's the weather.
Right.
And that's what bonds the people while you're making the movie. It could either tear you apart or bring you together. I often think of when we were shooting the opening titles of Maniac Cop 2. We were in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And the cameraman and I were in the back of a truck operating this remote camera. And I had sent a production assistant to quietly go over to what is considered to be the best steakhouse in New York, Peter Luger's, and buy 2 steaks for the cameraman and I. And I remember, here we are having world-class steaks in the back of this truck, this panel truck, while the crew is out there freezing to death, working along the East River, which, the bitter cold that was coming in. We were freezing in the paddle truck. They were even colder outside. And there we are with plastic knives and forks eating like these world-class steaks while we're working in the back, because it took so long to do those shots that you see in the film.
Wow. A few years ago, it was announced that Drive director Nicholas Winding Refn would be directing a Maniac Cop remake of some sort.
Yes.
I've not heard anything about that project in a while.
Well,
do you know what the current status?
I do. The current status is, we signed with HBO to do a series, not a single feature. And because we really didn't see, it didn't feel like there was enough of a market for a single feature, that it would be better to do as a series based on the economics and everything else doing the series. And Nick is still involved. Nick is going to be directing. He also is producing along with myself. And it's supposed to start shooting this fall.
Oh, very cool.
It was originally supposed to shoot last May, but for obvious reasons, that got canceled, and now it's scheduled for May. Scheduled for the fall, given hopefully no unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah. Do you have any creative input in the storylines or anything?
I don't, and that I did deliberately, because you can't have multiple chefs in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
There could only be one chef.
I agree. Your next credited directing gig and your final to date was for Uncle Sam, which saw you working again from a screenplay by Larry Cohen. How did you get involved in Uncle Sam?
Larry approached me with the idea of Uncle Sam, and it didn't really resonate with me. I'm from New York. I don't really know much about people outside New York. I don't know about so much people in Kentucky and all that. And I was doing a film in Tennessee, and it was during 4th of July. And I saw that 4th of July for people in Nashville, Tennessee, was a big deal. It was really a big deal. Not like in New York where you buy and go up on your rooftop and watch fireworks. That was the extent of 4th of July in New York. But when you get outside to places like Tennessee, probably Kentucky as well, there's a real patriotic flavor to 4th of July. And I started to think about Larry's script, and it started to really resonate with me. And so I signed on to do it.
And easy shoot, troubled shoot. How was making Uncle Sam?
It was in fact, it was probably my easiest shoot. We were shooting in a town called Laverne, California, which is sort of a sleepy California town. And I felt like when we were shooting the 4th of July stuff, it was like I was at a picnic. I had my chair. I'm outside, beautiful sunshine. It was beautiful weather. I was eating the props. They were cooking up hot dogs, and I'm eating the props as I'm sitting out there. It was just wonderful. It was really a really good time. But we didn't leave the town with a good taste in their mouth. When we did that explosion of the house at the end, we shot that at about 1:00 in the morning. And if you watch the Blu-ray, there's a short about it where the explosion was so big that it blew out windows of adjacent homes. And one of the homes, the glass went into a baby's crib that was by the window. And the next day in the local paper is a woman standing by her baby's crib with the glass in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they kicked us out of Laverne. Even though we had a bit more shooting to do there, we had to find some alternative places to shoot.
Oh, wow.
But, what are you going to do? Yeah. I will tell you, I did have a clue, because I was egging on the special effects guy. I kept saying to him, look, don't be a wuss. I want this big. I want this gigantic,
Mhm.
Also, the house that we rented, we had built a facade on it. But when he did the explosions, it blew out the pipes inside the house, the plumbing and everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I will tell you, my stunt coordinator, I was standing when I was standing near the special effects guy, and I asked my stunt coordinator, I say, listen, Spiro, where would be a safe place for me to stand? And he looks down the street at a tree like a block away. He goes, can you go behind that tree? I said, you're kidding. And he looked at me, he goes, this thing is going, he gave me a look like, I can't believe how much explosives are here.
Wow. Wow.
Can I get another tea?
You dedicated the film to Lucio Fulci. Had you
Yes.
been acquainted with Mr. Fulci?
I never met Lucio Fulci. We did it because he had passed away while we were making the film.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we came up with a somewhat clever idea as an homage to him.
True Romance is one of my all-time favorite movies. Tarantino, who wrote the script, of course, actually got the screenplay into your hands before Warner Brothers and Tony Scott got involved. Can you tell us the story behind your involvement with Tarantino and True Romance?
Sure. After Relentless, I'm looking for my next project. And Citadel wanted me to do Relentless 2. And I'm looking for a writer, and Scott Spiegel introduces me to Quentin Tarantino. And so I was looking for a writer for Relentless 2. And Quentin sent me True Romance and Natural Born Killers to read. And when I read True Romance, I was in love with the script. And I said, fuck Relentless 2. This is the movie I want to make. So I optioned the script. And I began for it. And I found a producer who was my French distributor on Maniac Cop 2, who came aboard to finance the movie. It was going to be about a $3 million movie. I cast it. I went to Detroit, scouted locations, worked on rewrites on the script with both Quentin and Roger Avery. And suddenly there was a pause in pre-production. And I had gotten wind of some rumors that Quentin had sent Tony Scott True Romance as a writing sample because to do work on Crimson Tide. Tony Scott was looking for a writer for Crimson Tide to do some polish on the dialogue. And so Quentin had sent True Romance, and Tony Scott wanted to make it. So suddenly I was caught in a situation of, this little movie being made into a big movie. And I really, at that point, had no control because once the financing came in from the French producer, Sami Hadida, I had to relinquish my control of the script. And that was it. So, I mean, it was, it was devastating to me. It really hurt a lot. But that was what happened. I got replaced, and a year later, Tony Scott made the film. Yeah.
Any hard feelings towards Tarantino today?
No, I would have done the same thing. I mean, you get an opportunity. Your movie goes from a $3 million movie to a $20+ million movie with a world-class director who at that time I think was the highest grossing director in the world. It's the business I'm in.
Right.
It's the if you want to, this, it's a hardball business, my friends, you
Mm.
know, and it's happened to a lot of directors. Did it affect me? Did it affect me? Yes, it did. It definitely affected me. It hurt, and but I can't hold any hard feelings towards Quentin. You know, I just can't, because it wasn't him. And I've seen Quentin numerous times since then. We've sat together in his theater and watched spaghetti westerns. So yeah.
Sometime back in the late 90s, or well, let me ask you this. Do you plan on ever getting behind the camera again?
I think about it. There are projects. There's a project in particular that I really like, but I don't have any immediate plans. Right now, things are going well with Blue Underground. I got the Maniac Cop series that's happening. Who knows if that series takes off? Maybe I'll wind up directing some episodes. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But I'm always busy. I'm never waiting. And when you're a director, and most directors will tell you this, often you're waiting between jobs, and it's torture.
Right.
There's never a day I don't have work to do, and I love that. I'm a workaholic. I love work. I love working on movies. I love dealing with the challenges of working on movies. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Right. Well, sometime back in the late 90s or early 2000s, I first became aware of Anchor Bay. Today, we have companies like Scream Factory, Arrow, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, of course, Blue Underground, who are giving our favorite films really killer new physical media releases. But back in the day, we had Anchor Bay. And Anchor Bay achieved a reputation where even if you'd never heard of the film, as long as that logo was on the spine of the DVD, you blind bought it because you knew it was
good housekeeping seal of approval. Got it.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Anchor Bay introduced hordes of horror fans like me to the works of Mario Bava, Dario Argento, and Lucio Fulci, and gave classics like Halloween, Dawn of the Dead, and Evil Dead their definitive, at least at that time, VHS and DVD releases. As somebody who Anchor Bay introduced a broader genre landscape to, I've wanted for years to thank you for that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't have anything to do with Dawn of the Dead. Halloween, yes, I was involved with Halloween, the initial release of Halloween. Well, it wasn't the initial. I would say we'll call it the second release of Halloween in the double lenticular DVD.
I've got that.
And Evil Dead a little bit.
How did you come to get involved with Anchor Bay?
I was dabbling in Laserdisc in the 90s as kind of a hobby. I was, again, as I said, between gigs as a director, you're always waiting for your next gig. And so as an in-between thing, I was acquiring rights to movies and putting them out on Laserdisc, which was then state-of-the-art format. And along comes Anchor Bay, and they wanted Laserdisc masters to put on VHS. And that connected me with them. And a gentleman by the name of Jay Douglas, who's no longer with us, who passed about a year ago. And Jay had the vision that, DVD is the future. VHS is gone. DVD is the future. And he really was a visionary. And so it became a thing where they needed somebody particularly in Los Angeles, who could remaster these movies or supervise the remastering of the movies, the featurettes, because Anchor Bay was based in Michigan. So I became, Jay came to me one day and said, "Can you work with us for 6 months?" And I wasn't an employee. I was an independent contractor that I would, doing work for them on project to project. And so I said, sure. Well, the 6 months became like 3 years, where I was doing all the Anchor Bay DVDs, and it was a fun period. I had a lot of employees working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, literally 24 hours a day, cutting featurettes, doing restorations, doing QCs, doing all that stuff. It was a lot of work and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. Did you go into it with a wish list of movies that you wanted to license for Anchor Bay?
Yes, and what I did is I went to Rome, checked into a hotel, called up the sales agents that I knew, and rattled off the movies I wanted to license. Movies like Django, Suspiria, House by the Cemetery, City of the Living Dead. I can go on and on with all the movies. Right. And I just literally sat with a checkbook in a hotel room in Rome, licensing the movies. And I was getting them for next to nothing.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't a lot of those the license holders for the Italian movies, they really jumped at the opportunity to have their films released through Anchor Bay to a broader audience?
Well, they didn't give a shit about that. They didn't even know Anchor Bay from from anything. They didn't know Anchor Bay. And plus, I was licensing them through my own company. I wasn't doing them on behalf of Anchor Bay. But besides that, really it was that I was going in and buying, say, 5 to 10 movies at a time from a sales agent, which amounted to a big chunk of dough for them. And their movies were just languishing. They had considered them to be dead as a doornail. The VHS heydays were over. And they were lucky. They felt lucky to get this idiot who would give them, $10,000 to license their movie and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And
were you surprised by the support from genre fans for all of those movies, or most of those movies, I guess I should say?
Not at all, because they're great movies, and they were never treated properly by the companies that had the rights to them on the VHS Laserdisc days. So I was giving them the Criterion treatment. I was treating, a film like House by the Cemetery like Criterion would treat a Fellini movie.
Right.
I would give it the same care. And so, no, I was not surprised, because these were great films. They were fun.
Were there any titles that surprised you how well they sold, or ones that didn't sell?
I can't say back then there were any films that didn't really sell enough to make them, somewhat profitable. But I don't know. I would say the spaghetti westerns. I'll tell you the ones. I'll tell you what's so funny. What sold? What films didn't sell as well as I thought they would? The Hammer films. You have this very vocal cult following for Hammer films, but the problem with the Hammer films is they're polite horror.
Right.
They're very, they're very polite, very genteel as far as the horror is concerned. Versus a movie like Demon, Lamberto Bava's Demon. It's that's going to sell much better than the Hammer films.
Right. Yeah. Were there any titles that you wanted to license for Anchor Bay or through your own company for Anchor Bay, but just couldn't for whatever reason?
Well, I tried to license. This is funny. I wanted to license the Dick Moss movies when I was working with Anchor Bay. The Lift, Amsterdam, and so I wound up licensing them like 20 years later or so for my company and putting them out, and they didn't really do well. They did just okay. And I was shocked because I really like those movies. I liked Amsterdam. I liked The Lift.
I do too.
Can't say I liked, what was that? I forget the name of the other one. Lift. I think it's called The Lift.
It is.
Not The Lift. Wait a second. The Lift.
There's Amsterdam, The Lift.
And what's the third one with the actress? Can't think of the name.
With Naomi Watts.
Yeah.
I can't think of it either. I'm sure somebody in the chat will.
Yeah, they'll come up with it.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, so I wound up licensing them, and they did okay. I don't know.
Down.
Oh, Down. That's
it.
Down.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you established Blue Underground while you were working with Anchor Bay to produce the extra. Were you licensing them to Blue Underground for Anchor Bay, or were you producing extras for Anchor Bay releases as Blue Underground?
Both.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't acquiring any films. Let me just tell you. What happened was Anchor Bay was owned by a company called Handelman. Handelman hired a company to do an analysis of the Anchor Bay business because Anchor Bay started to really grow. It became this monster company because of DVD for Handelman. And the company came back to Handelman and said, look, unless Anchor Bay gets involved in production or pre-buying new movies, releasing catalog titles is not really a renewable resource. In other words, once you buy a title, you bought the title. That's it. There's no, it's the catalogs is a finite amount of movies.
Right.
And so if you want to grow Anchor Bay, you have to be ready to invest money in what is considered to be a more risky business, which is pre-buying movies or producing films.
Right.
So a Handelman company quietly put Anchor Bay on the sales block. And that occurred during a time when my company was still producing for Anchor Bay because they had acquired a lot of titles that still had yet to be released. So my company continued to do the work, but I was informed that there would be no longer any new acquisitions for Anchor Bay. So I started to do so I formed Blue Underground and did the acquisitions into Blue Underground. So there wasn't really a cut between my work with Anchor Bay and Blue Underground. It was more like a 1-year dissolve in movie terms. Whereas the Anchor Bay work was fading, the Blue Underground work was ramping up.
Blue Underground has quite a catalog of releases itself, ranging from Maniac, which recently got 4K treatment, Fulci Zombie, which also now is available in 4K, as well as the upcoming 4Ks for Dead and Buried and Maniac Cop 2 and 3. I've seen a lot of people in the chat asking for their own favorite Blue Underground releases that haven't made the cut to 4K or haven't made the jump to 4K yet. I've seen several people mention The Prowler, for instance. Can you give us a hint at what might be coming down the 4K or standard Blu-ray pipeline in the future?
Well, coming up, we have Toolbox Murders that's coming out in 4K.
Oh, cool.
We did a brand new 4K restoration of that, or we're in the process of doing it. God Told Me To. Aforementioned Maniac Cop 2 and 3, which have already been announced. We're working on a restoration. This is a major restoration of Goodbye Uncle Tom. We're doing a big restoration of that. So that's one of our surprisingly good selling movies. It always sells, that movie. And so we have that. And let's see. And in regard to the Prowler, the issue with that is we have access to the internegative, but we're looking to see if we could find better materials for the Prowler. We're searching. The same problem with Dead and Buried. It took us 3 years to complete Dead and Buried. So, you have to do it when it's ready to be done.
What about a film like the Toolbox Murders? Was that a difficult one to track down original elements, or like the original?
No, actually,
negative?
that was quite simple.
Oh,
yeah. The negative was at a lab in LA, and what we did is we struck what's called a low contrast print from the original negative, and which is kind of like making it interpositive, and we transferred off of that.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing Toolbox Murders and glorious. I can't imagine that gritty movie in glorious 4K, but I'm looking forward to it. So
with Dolby Atmos sound.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and God told me to. I mean, that was one that I was kind of hoping that you'd mention. That one needs, I think, just a really good new release period. But if it's getting a 4K, I mean,
yeah,
awesome.
It's a 4K restoration on that.
Oh, that's so awesome. The death of physical media is something that people have been predicting for years now. What do you think the future holds for physical media?
Well, I think the future is for I think when you lump physical media is misleading. I think where physical media is going is there's 3 distinct markets for physical media. There's number one, the mainstream new releases. Those, I think, are more vulnerable. The people who want to watch a Marvel film, they'll watch it on physical media, or they'll watch it streaming, or they'll watch it, anyway. They don't really care. They want to just watch it when they want to watch it, where they want to watch it. And that makes up the bulk of the marketplace, is that customer. The next customer is another large segment, which is the budget, physical media. The people who want 5 horror films on a DVD or Blu-ray for under $10. So they can take it home on a Saturday night. They don't give a shit what it looks like. And then they can play it and throw away the disc afterwards. They don't really care. And, we know those films. They're in every gas station and every truck stop in America.
Right.
Then there's companies like Blue Underground and the other boutique labels. And we are the collector market. We're the market for the people that are watching your show. And that marketplace demands the very best quality. They demand great extras. They demand great sound, great picture. And quality matters to them. And for me, I won't release any films going forward that I can't see us putting on 4K Blu-ray. That's really where I see the marketplace going, is to 4K Blu-ray. For the collectors. I don't say that for everything. 4K. I don't know if we'll see right away, 5 horror films on a 4K for $9.99. I don't think that's going to be happening.
Not anytime soon.
But the collectors want it. They have home theaters. They want the best sound, the Dolby Atmos if available, the best picture, and it's really, the pressure is on, companies like myself and Severin and Kino and Shout Factory to do the very best we can for that collector market.
Yeah, exactly. Amen. How has the business of filmmaking changed over the years? In your opinion, could a movie like Maniac even get made today?
It can get made, but would it get widely distributed? No. And I think the reason for that is the theaters are focused solely on the blockbusters.
Right.
even a mid-level studio film stands very little chance of breaking through in the cinemas. People are just not, the people and the theater owners, and they're just not, keyed into playing those kind of movies. I mean, they're making those Halloween, Jason Blum movies, for tens of millions of dollars.
Mhm.
They're not making them they're not making them for 135,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Big investment. They want a big return, which means less risk taking.
Sure. Now, there's always going to be that occasional under $1 million movie that breaks through. It will always happen. Some guy is making a movie right now in Kentucky, probably, that we'll be talking about a year from now as being the big breakthrough film. But
Let's
they're
hope
so
so.
rare. Whereas back in my day, it was week after week. I mean, before Maniac came out, there was Scanners in the theater the week before. Those were the movies that were playing. And then after, there was Don Coscarelli's Phantasm. And you know what I'm saying? It was a different time.
Just a different time. Looking back on all your years in the industry, what do you think your legacy will be?
Well, I hope that I hope my legacy is going to be my love of film. That I really do love movies, and I care about whether I was making a movie or putting out a Blu-ray or whatever it is, of giving the audience the very best I can give them. That to me is it. I just always want to give best. And there are times I've done it to my economic disadvantage. I'm not a very good bottom line guy. I'm always thinking of the best quality and the best presentation. But I think if I look in the aggregate, I've done pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. We've just cracked 2 hours. I've got a couple of questions from the audience I'd like to ask you, and then I'll let you go. This has been amazing. You've been so candid. This has been such an awesome conversation. So thank you so much, man.
Sure.
Let's see here from my buddy Turi, aka T Money 86. He says, I would love to know how the end of Maniac came to fruition. What was the idea behind that?
Is he talking about the very last shot of the movie, or?
That was actually going to be something I was going to ask you. What does the ending of the film mean? Is Zito is his mind just completely breaking on himself, or is this a death, or is this like a rebirth?
I wanted to kind of leave it open-ended, and I wanted it. My idea is the ending was so crazy that I wanted people to debate about it as they were going to their car after the movie. Figure out what the hell was that all about at the end of the movie. And so for me to give my interpretation doesn't make it valid. It's about as good an argument as the other people may have about the ending of the film. So I would say just interpret it any way you want.
Very, very good question, Turi. Vintage Weeb 82 says, any news on the Fire and Ice 4K?
Again, it's a material issue. We're trying to track down. We have the rights. We have the rights for a long time on that picture. Problem is, the materials have vanished. They were originally at Fox, and somehow the negative left Fox, and we don't know where it went. And we're looking. We're still in the investigation stage.
Well, and something that I think needs to be stated here, when you're doing a 4K, you want to go back to the negative. You want to get that original to give it the best possible quality picture and sound quality. So with a movie like Prowler, people are still asking about Prowler in the chat. A lot of Prowler fans tonight. Since they don't have that original element, a 4K is just not it's not gonna be a great looking 4K. You can't just take a bad print of the movie, throw it through the 4K machine, and make it a beautiful looking movie.
There
it
are
just
no
doesn't
miracles.
Happen.
The 4K
right.
is totally reliant on the element that you're using to scan. You can do as much restoration as you want, but you'll never be able to make it look anything that the audience would be happy with, unless you have that original element or an interpositive. If we can get an interpositive, or we can get the original negative, that's really the key.
Eobard Thawne asks, Bill, how did you come up with the look of Matt Cordell in Maniac Cop 2? Also, Maniac Cop is top 5 horror franchises for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And how we came up with the makeup for him, it was created by Dean Gates in Maniac Cop 2. And we went through different iterations of it. And, it's funny with the Maniac Cop makeup, I was never really 100% happy with it in any of the films. Maybe the closest was Maniac Cop 3. But it never was 100%. It could be because I lose objectivity, and so I'm not a good judge of it. I'm really not. I'm always second guessing myself.
My buddy Dan, not really a question, just a suggestion that might be a really interesting thing. He says, Mr. Lustig, please write a book. It would be fantastic. All of the stories you could tell. Ever thought about writing a book about your all your years in the industry?
I've been approached on it, but I just don't have time to sit down and write a book. I just don't.
Darren Burrows asks, can you ask Bill about his work on Alice Sweet Alice and what it was like on the set of Inferno and Tenebrae?
Okay. Well, Alice Sweet Alice, my work was limited to the scenes that were in the house. It involved, I was working as an assistant to the special effects guy. I forget his name. But I was involved with the knife coming through the banister and stabbing the woman's foot, and the stabbing of the fat guy when he comes to his door and they stab him and he falls backwards. I think he breaks a fish tank with a goldfish or something. Yeah, I was involved with the scenes specific to that location. The problem with Alice Sweet Alice, like many independent films, is that it was a film where they were raising money as they were going along. So I was part of the first tranche of the film, the first shooting of the film, which was all involving that house. Then it shut down and we were disbanded. Then they crewed up with another crew to shoot some more. I was involved with the body mold of Brooke Shields that I don't think you really see in the movie. Her burned body. I don't know if it was really shown.
It's not shown that I recall.
I don't think they ever used it, but we went and we did a body cast of her. And that was really it. I worked on it maybe for a month. I was pre-production. We was shooting in Paterson, New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey. I used to have to drive the special effects makeup guy to the set because he was, I think his name was Tom something. Anyway, I used to have to drive him because he was a bit of a drinker. And I used to hear stories from him about that movie, the Oliver Stone film. What was it called? The one he shot with Martine Biswick, his first movie that he
The-
denies.
Oh,
Seizure, I think it's called.
okay.
Seizure.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the makeup guy on Seizure.
That's funny. And you were on the sets of Tenebrae and Inferno?
Not on the sets. We were shooting the New York exteriors.
Oh.
That's where I met Dario. I met Dario when Dario was shooting the park scene, the central park scene, where the guy comes from the food truck and runs across the water and gets attacked by the rats.
Yeah.
I was there during the shooting of that scene, and there was, of course, a lot of downtime between setups. And Dario and I used to sit on the Central Park bench in the middle of the night, and he would talk about his love of shooting at night. And he pointed to the hotel room across the way in Central Park where he wrote the scene that we were shooting that night.
Oh, that's very cool, man.
Yeah. Lamberto Bava was there. They were shooting the plates of the full moon going between the buildings. Yeah. And there was also the scenes with the fire trucks pulling up on Riverside Drive to what was supposed to be a burning building, but it wasn't. It was just shooting the angle of the fire trucks pulling up. Mm-hmm. And then it was a reverse angle of the girl mailing a letter. You know, there was all these little bits of New York that were in Inferno. In Tenebrae, it was really only one day. It was shooting Anthony Franciosa riding his bicycle to JFK Airport and having it put in the back of a Rolls Royce and him walking inside the airport. Newsflash. Here's a newsflash.
Sure.
The reason these little snippets are shot in New York or in America with these Italian movies is back in the 70s, there was a lot of heavy taxes that were imposed on movies, on the producers and stuff. So what the producers would do, if let's say it cost $200,000 to shoot the Inferno scenes, we would send an invoice to the Italians for, let's say, $500,000. And so they would get permission from the Italian government to wire $500,000. They would take the excess money and stick it in their American bank accounts out of reach of the Italian authorities. That's why you would see movies like Cannibal Holocaust. You would see all these movies in the 70s where they would shoot these little pieces. And you'd say, why do it go all the way to New York?
Exactly. I've wondered that.
Anthony Franciosa crossing the 59th Street Bridge on a bicycle, you know?
I've wondered that.
It doesn't make any sense, but that's the reason.
Thank you. All right, 2 more questions, and I'm going to let you go. So I'm cutting off the questions in the chat. My buddy Nico wants to know. Well, actually, Nico says, "Mr. Lustig, thank you so much for your release of the Stendhal Syndrome and House by the Cemetery. Can you talk a bit about the challenges of securing rights to Italian co-produced films?"
It's no more or less challenging than securing the rights to American films. You go to whoever holds the rights and you license it. And it, really it's there are 2 issues when you're there's really only one issue, I would say. 2 issues. Who owns the movie and what are the condition of the materials? That's it. Those are the 2 issues. Okay. And that's always the case. It's always the case. Rights holder, materials.
Terrell Smith has asked over and over again. So this is a question that he is dying to know. Who played the gang members in Vigilante? There you go, Tyrell.
Oh, fuck. One of them was Don Blakely. Vinny Russo didn't. He's the only one I remember. Don
Mm.
Blakely. I'm so sorry. Sorry,
So
gang members, if you're watching.
I was actually thinking at one point that this Tyrell Smith guy must have been one of the gang members in Vigilante because he's asked about it over and over again. But I don't know. I guess he just really liked. I guess he just really liked the gang members in Vigilante. So, okay, I'm gonna call it there. This has been absolutely fantastic. You've been phenomenal, Mr. Lustig. So candid, so many great stories. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much, man.
Do me a favor, send me a link to the archive.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. I absolutely will. Thank you so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Let me do some shout outs here and then I'll play us out. Shout out to Nico for the two $5 super chats. Shout out to Steven for the two $2 super chats. Shout out to Tori for the $20 super chat. Thank you, Phantasm81 for the 100 peso super chat. Thank you, Vintage Weeb 82 for the $5 super chat. Thank you, Eobard Thon for the $5 super chat. And Nico, thank you for the additional $2 super chat. Thank you all for hanging out tonight. And it's been a very, very lively chat. Everybody seems to have really enjoyed this conversation and have learned a lot, apparently, too. So it's been very educational, which is always a good thing. So,
all right. Well, take care. Good night, everyone.
Yep. Take care. Good night, everybody. Stay safe. Be good. And yeah, peace.